Front stretch is a bedeviled Bermuda Triangle.
While the old magic finally returns for a former champ.
This and more next on Speedweek. Several major divisions were in action last weekend. IndyCar's Winston Cup, Formula One, and IMSA. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Speedweek. I'm Bob Jenkins.
And I'm Larry Newber. The Knoxville Nationals and NHRA also raced, and we'll have reports in the next half hour.
Michigan International Speedway has always been good to Bill Elliott. He had won 5 of the last 7 races there going into Sunday's Champion Sparkplug 400. Bill was right behind pole sitter Davey Allison on the starting grid. Davey had won the pole for the 3rd time this year. He led outside front row starter Alan Kowicki, Bill, and Ken Schrader in the early laps. Cale Yarborough carried one of our in-car cameras. It was a frustrating day for Cale. He would last only a few more laps after this fist-shaking at Lake Speed. The cautions would be few, but close calls numerous. Rusty Wallace got sideways while racing with Richard Petty, Schrader, and Kowicki. The first yellow was for a Charlie Rudolph spin down the backstretch. He was able to continue. Dale Earnhardt had the lead at the restart, and a restart at Michigan almost always leads to 4 and sometimes 5 abreast action. Rusty would lead 4 different times during the race, and at times appeared to be on his way to his 2nd consecutive Winston Cup victory. Tim Richmond would be a DNF, this after a poor qualifying run that placed him 25th on the grid. And Ken Reagan spun and hit the wall in oil from Tim's car. King Richard also looked like he could win the 201st of his career, but his race would end later with a crash. Another close call involved Earnhardt. He got sideways in turn 3, but gathered it back in. Davey wound up 5th in part because of this pit stop in which the jack fell before the right rear was on. The final caution only 10 laps from the finish. Jim Sauter sliding through the tri-oval also involved Jeff Bodine. The last 8 laps saw lots of action. Rusty, while leading, slides high out of 2 and grazes the concrete. Dale took Elliott all the way to the apron in the tri-oval in an effort to hold off his challenge. But with just 2 laps to go, Elliott got around Dale to win his 3rd straight Champion Sparkplug event. Dale, despite clutch problems and a broken spring, took 2nd in a close battle with Morgan Shepherd. Richard drove a damaged car back to the garage area after a spin and wall contact on the backstretch on the final lap. The race was admittedly tough for Elliott.
Tell you what, I've seen a lot of races, but that beats all I've ever seen. I was handling through the corners extremely well, but the car was just a little bit lazy up off the turns, but it still run good. I think I was just trying to bound the car up to some extent.
Rusty Wallace's wife, Patty, gave birth to a 10-pound, 3-ounce baby Tuesday. It's the couple's 3rd child, 2nd son. Few driver changes for next year are being talked about in Winston Cup, but Ken Schrader is talking with several teams. He could stay with Junie Dunleavy or move to Bud Moore. Ricky Rudd considering even non-Ford teams, and one rumor has him driving for Cale Yarborough. Waddell Wilson might move either within the Hendrick team or elsewhere, and Brett Bodine could be involved with him next year. And Jack Roush has signed Robin Pemberton and Steve Meal as mechanics for his new Winston Cup effort.
Larry Pearson won his 4th Busch Grand National race of the year last weekend at Orange County Speedway in North Carolina.
Nelson Piquet has a habit this year in Formula One. Now, the other drivers think it's a bad one, but it just might propel him to the World Championship. The addiction, finishing 2nd. Nelson finished there for the 6th time this year, but the race route in Austria last weekend, a real odyssey. In recent years, race-delaying accidents at the start have occurred at the rate of 1 per year. But watch this. First start. Note I said first. Near the rear of the 20-car field, Martin Brundle and a Zaxby breaks something and involves 4 others. The now customary 45-minute cleanup delay, and then this. The 2nd attempt sees Nigel Mansell with a clutch problem slow getting off the line. But Tracy's Brabham is squeezed, and before this one is over, 10 more cars slam into the mess. No injuries, but almost half the field has now been involved in the 2 wrecks. John Bisignano with Eddie Cheever.
Can they repair your race car so that you can make the 3rd start?
Yeah, and what am I going to do for the 4th and the 5th one?
The 3rd time was the charm this race when points leader Piquet roared off to the lead. Still not a clean start. Alain Prost balks and must start the race from the pits, and shortly thereafter, Michele Alboretto's Ferrari occupying garage space. They're making this one easier than usual for Williams. Terry Boutsen did his best to worry them, but it lasted only until pit stops. Mansell caught his teammate, and as usual, when he puts a pass on Piquet, he seems to delight in making it very visual. Everybody stopped for tires, but nobody caught Nigel. Nelson was second, the Benettons of Teo Fabi and Boutsen were third and fourth, Senna fifth, and Prost sixth. In points, Piquet now leads Senna by more than the 9 points for winning, Mansell by 15 points, same as a first and a second.
Speedweek is brought to you by BF Goodrich TA Radials. We make your car perform. And by Quaker State Motor Oil. New Quaker State with QSX keeps your engine cleaner to last longer.
In a moment, Mario rides out the second vicious one this year.
In ARS, Byrne experiences number 2, but it's the kind you want.
Crown saw a short field, the end of a winless streak, and the first 500-mile victory for the Chevy Ilmore. Johnny Rutherford qualified his backup car after this spin and wall contact Friday. Johnny would finish last in the race after another crash with Scott Brayton on the first lap. Tom Sneva's refueling rig was here, but his pit was empty as a result of his recent firing from the curb team. CART mandated 45 inches of boost instead of 48. Mario Andretti's pole speed about 5 miles an hour slower than last year. He and son Michael exchanged the lead twice during the first 30 laps of the race until first pit stops. Just after those stops, Jeff McPherson crashed his car against the third turn boilerplate, and Bobby Rahal spun trying to avoid the accident. He lost laps while the push trucks arrived at the scene. Jeff's car was extensively damaged. McPherson escaped injury. That wasn't the case with Mario. He suffered a separated shoulder in this hard contact in turn 1. He isn't expected to miss any races, but it's the second time this year Mario has been hurt in a crash. Emerson Fittipaldi led 60 laps, but his Ilmore didn't go the distance. Danny Sullivan didn't have motor trouble, but gearbox problems sidelined him. Teammate Al Unser Sr. joined the list of wall bangers a little more than midway through the race. Michael Andretti had clutch problems. Trying to exit the pits, the car stalled. Then the crew broke off their rear wing trying to push the car. The key move came at the end of a late yellow. Rick Mears came in for a final top-off. Jeff Brabham, who had been in contention all day, took a chance and finished second.
Fortunately for Rick, he had enough gas, and unfortunately for me, he did as well. So, the strategy, we took a bit of a gamble, and we came in and really stretched it pretty thin at the end, but it was worth it.
Mears did run out coming down for the checkered, but he won his first IndyCar race in 2 years.
I knew that we had a good shot at it, but until you see that checkered flag, you never know. And we actually, worked with it. When it ran out of fuel and coming off of the last turn for the checkered flag, I about had a heart attack, But, it's one of those things. It's either your day or it's not. It's either going to happen or it's not, and you can't worry about it.
Rumors galore in IndyCar racing. New venues may include temporary street circuits in Vancouver, British Columbia, and Dallas. And reportedly, the IndyCars will race in Brazil next year, but not sanctioned by CART.
In the who might go where category, Mario has the inside track to the Porsche. European papers say the car won't be ready by Nazareth, but Al Holbert says all systems are go. Either Emerson Fittipaldi or Danny Sullivan may replace Mario at Newman Haas. Raul Boesel or Kevin Kogan could replace Al Unser Jr. at Shearson. We hear that Howdy Holmes, who hasn't raced IndyCars regularly for a couple of years, provided the startup money for Nigel Bennett's effort with Roger Penske next year. And Danny Sullivan will drive in the Stock Car Connection race at the new Nazareth track in a Ford.
So far, this year's ARS series has belonged to Didier Taze and Tommy Byrne. At Pocono last week, nothing changed except maybe the challengers coming on. Belgium Didier won 3 of the first 4 events and has dominated qualifying even more. But Tommy outgunned him this time. He immediately set sail from his 172-mile-per-hour pole and began clicking off laps at 170, strong. Didier carried his Buick March for a while, but eventually began to backslide. First, Jeff Andretti, winner of the opener at Phoenix, was passed, and eventually Taze had sunk all the way to 5th. New faces on the scene included Scott Atchison from Super V's, who crashed in practice and visited the crash house, and Dean Hall from Atlantics, who drove solidly to 7th, and Mike Hooper in blue, although his entry was last minute, thrown together by Bill Boynton of Opar Racing and Bill Simpson, who has become a great patriarch of this series. Mike hadn't driven since last year, but truly raced well. He finished 3rd. No one ever challenged Byrne today. Andretti, winner here last year, was second, and Steve Millen continues his top 5 runs with a 4th. Car count, 14.
They also raced in the VW Cup Series at Pocono. These are Volkswagen Golfs, top qualifier at over 104. You think there's drafting in Winston Cup? Look at these guys. And with a drafting partner, speeds increase by over 10 miles an hour. This isn't an expensive, sophisticated type of racing. Team Boehm communicates with their drivers using a good old-fashioned CB radio. Mark Boehm went in as points leader, but this pit stop dropped him to an 18th place finish and 3rd in points. There were 4 lead changes. Les Boehm, Mark's father, led first and the last 5 laps. Daughter-in-law Elizabeth was as happy as if her husband had won. Teammate Brazilian Luis Campos was second for the 2nd straight race. The husband and wife team of Robert and Sheila Bushy were 3rd and 4th. That's Sheila congratulating Les on his first career victory.
Next, Rain shares the marquee with international winners in IMSA.
While from 2 nations trade first place all day in Canada.
Travel arrangements made through Eastern Airlines. This year, fly non-stop to San Juan, where you can easily connect to one of the many exciting Caribbean destinations. At Eastern, we've got your summer.
The woods of southern Wisconsin were a rainforest for last weekend's IMSA race. Jim Roller reports.
Torrential rains played havoc with drivers and officials at the Lowenbrow 500 Camel GT Sports Car Race Sunday at Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. Thunderstorms delayed the start of the race 90 minutes, then forced International Motorsports Association officials to shorten the event to 328 miles. Controversy raged throughout the race as some drivers complained about the conditions. At one point, the race did have to be stopped for 30 minutes due to flooding. In the end, though, it was the Porsche-mounted tandem of Price Cobb and Johnny Dumfries who led a sweep of the top 6 finishers by the German manufacturer. They splashed home 42 seconds ahead of Argentinian Oscar Lurari and his Swiss teammate Walter Brun. Besides the weather worries, Dumfries, a Scotsman who was making his American racing debut, almost ran out of gas at the finish.
Well, I wasn't sure how many laps we had left in terms of fuel. The guys just told me to stay out there, and you know, the car was fantastic, especially in the wet. I mean, the weather conditions were unbelievable, but the car really stood up to it well.
In the Camel Lights class for smaller prototype racers, Charles Morgan from Conway, Arizona, and St. Louis, Missouri's Jim Rothbarth teamed up in a Pontiac Fiero for their first win of the year. In the GTO class for big bore sports cars, neither rain nor this mid-race spin could stop Illinois driver Chris Neifel and Colorado youngster Paul Dallenbeck from claiming their first ever Camel GT victory. Honors in the GTU class for smaller engine sports cars went to defending series titleist Tom Kendall, who cruised home to his season's 3rd win. The next outing for the Camel GT regulars will be Sunday, September 6th through the streets of San Antonio, Texas. Reporting from Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, this is Jim Roller.
Support races at Elkhart Lake also feature the International Sedans and the next to the last race of the year for the American Challenge Series. It was a close competitive race for all 12 laps. Dick Danielson led Irv Hare and others on the first circuit. Hare also led. In fact, there were 4 lead changes among 3 drivers in the 12 circuits. Irv broke late and Danielson won, but only by a few feet over Clay Young. Jerry Thompson 3rd, followed by Robin Dallenbach and Steve Clark. It was Dick's 3rd win of the year, and he now leads Hare by 1 point in the series standings. In international sedans, Dennis Shaw found concrete just as the flag dropped. And Dave Jolly found turning right not too easy when it started to rain, but he recovered from this to finish 3rd. And this is what Doug Peterson's Integra looked like after a guardrail encounter. Amos Johnson won his first race of the year, but Parker Johnstone, by virtue of his 2nd place finish, has clinched the series championship.
The reawakening of the former Can-Am series in America and Canada continues. Remember, now called Cat Racing, a combination of old Can-Am cars and recent vintage Indy cars. They raced at the Sanair Triangle near Quebec. 20 cars roared off at green, and a prominent figure from Can-Am's past, Jacques Villeneuve, swooped into the lead. He and front row mate Bill Tempero in red were a second faster than everyone, and their times in the race would have put them in the last IndyCar field. Tempero's 2-year-old March shadowed Jacques Lola Frisbee, dusted off by his Canadian tire crew for this race and fitted with a new Chevy, and then he passed back. Most front runners lasted. Jacques and Bill exchanged the lead 6 times until, with 10 laps to go, Bill finally put the closer on Villeneuve in traffic. In Rothman's Porsche Challenge, Richard Spenard fired off from pole again. When Brian Malcolm spun and won, he was clobbered by Douglas Castor. Spenard went uncontested, but Scott Goodyear raced around Claude Gou for second. 19-year-old Paul Tracy qualified for pole but missed the required warm-up lap for the 2000s and was forced to start last. He passed all and eventually took the lead, but ran out of gas, rewarding the lead and the win eventually to Stefan Proud. Daniel Campeau demonstrated why, when one hits the wall, one should be attentive to the equipment on the next turn.
In our next segment, after a string of runner-ups, Allen is prominent in drags.
Yet another Allen leaves his mark on the Sprint Car Nationals.
I'm fascinated with speed. But winning is more than a quest for speed. It's a measure of skill, a test of guts. And though NASCAR has changed through the decades, its spirit never will. It's not just the machine, it's the man who drives it. We're proud to be a part of this great sport. Busch, the official beer of NASCAR.
No changes in NHRA points, but at least 2 of the leaders did not win this week's Nationals in Brainerd. Pro stock Bruce Allen in the rear and Morrison Chevy has been in 4 previous finals, finishing second every time. And he had lost to the same opponent here, Bob Glidden, in each of the last 2 North Star National finals. Either he had no chance, or finally, it was his time. Well, it's his time. Glidden remains points leader. Funny cars have become the private battleground of John Force and Kenny Bernstein lately. They're here again. Their ETs will be within 0.04 of a second. KB's Buick LeSabre scores its 6th of the year. That's 1 away from Prudhomme's single-season best for funnies, and Kenny has 5 more events to go. Bernstein is the winningest driver of this decade with 17. Joe Amato is the other points leader not winning. He didn't even survive round 1, but Darrell Gwynn did, and in the final, free pass when Dan Pastorini flowed too much fuel into his monster and it broke. Darrell's second win. He's very much in the thick of the points.
The Kings Royal at Eldora Speedway is the highest-paying sprint car race in the country, but undoubtedly the most prestigious is the Knoxville Nationals in Iowa. It rained Wednesday, Thursday, and part of Friday night, but before the postponement on Friday, Leland McSpadden hit Randy Smith, who slid high and collected Bobby Allen. Then on Saturday, Joey Allen did an up-and-over in a tangle with Richard Griffin. Saturday night's A-Main actually began in the wee hours of Sunday morning. Steve Kinzer was on the pole with Jeff Swindell alongside, then Kenny Jacobs and Bobby Davis Jr. Steve would never be challenged. He took off and lapped all but the top 5 cars. Only one yellow slowed the race when Joe Gertie stopped in turn 1. Davis would never be challenged for second. It was his best finish ever in the Nationals. Mark Kinzer and Kenny Jacobs did have a pretty good battle, with Mark finally taking 4th. This was Steve's 5th Knoxville title, and he has now won 9 straight in the World of Outlaws.
In the Northeast, neither of the 2 leaders in NASCAR modified points won last weekend. Reggie Ruggiero leader, nor Jimmy Spencer, last year's champ, although Jimmy came close. The modifieds played in a couple of home parks, Stafford Springs Friday and Thompson Sunday, both in Connecticut. Friday, before 10,000 people, Mike McLaughlin began from pole. As Reggie was caught in traffic, Brian Ross in 69 and Jimmy in 24 squirted through. Ross showed particular strength. On a restart, Ruggiero's car mumbled, setting off this chain of reactions involving 10 cars. And shortly after the next restart, Ruggiero and Tom Bowles collide. Reggie's out, but his weekend is not over yet. More action later caught Bob Park touching Dave Resendez, and around goes David. Spencer outdrives Ross for second, but there's no catching Magic Shoes. That's McLaughlin. Moving to Thompson Sunday, Spencer is now the new points leader, and Ruggiero's weekend of horrors will continue. Friday's 3rd placer, Brian Ross, moves up to second, and he's not through. This near-terminal detour, a tangle with Spencer, sends Jimmy to the wall, also damages George Kent. Then later, very near the end, Ruggiero is in a 3-car melee, and this time, it's carried home. Ross wins and matches McLaughlin's weekend tally, a 1st and a 3rd.
Kenny Bernstein explains IndyCar safety equipment in this week's edition of the Bernstein File, brought to you by Quaker State.
As a driver, I'm always looking for safer things to wear when I'm driving my race car. It's no different with IndyCar drivers. In fact, we wear almost the same materials. We both wear the fireproof underwear, both top and bottom, the socks that are fireproof, and the shoes. Our gloves are a little bit different. Mine are much thicker. Theirs are thinner, but they're certainly both fireproof. The suits are very much the same. They're made the same way with the same material. Mine is 6 layers thick. Theirs are 3. But remember, I only have to be in the car 5.5 seconds. They're in their car for 3 hours. In the helmet department, they're both made out of carbon fiber with a Lexan shield. This shield's really strong. A ball-peen hammer can't even open it up. When a guy's driving down the Indy racetrack and he gets hit in the head with something, this has got to protect him. But it goes a little further in Indy cars. The refuelers, the people that put the fuel in, have to be protected also. In our drag racing, we don't have that problem. The refuelers today wear the same clothing that the driver does, but in the helmet department, it's a little bit different. Same helmet, carbon fiber, Lexan cover, but it has a bib made out of fireproof material. What I thought was neat about this is the same material that we used back in 1970 when I started drag racing. I'm Kenny Bernstein.
Now, here's this week's trivia question. Among these Formula One champs, who has never won a Can-Am race? A. Jackie Stewart, B. Keke Rosberg, C. John Surtees, D. Alan Jones, or E. Sir Jack Brabham? Bob will have the answer in a moment.
Bob Strange, B.F. Goodrich test engineer.
The trick to building great all-terrain tires is making them as good off-road as on. All-terrain TAs from B.F. Goodrich are tested in some of the roughest off-road situations in the world. I believe TA radials are the best performance tires in the world, and I torture them to keep them that way.
TA radials from B.F. Goodrich, tested tough to make your truck perform.
Here's the trivia question answer. Stewart won twice in 1971, same year as his second World Crown. Rosberg driving a Spider and winning in 79. Surtees, the 64 World Champ, was the first Can-Am champ, Lola, 66. Alan Jones, a 6-time Can-Am event winner. But E. Sir Jack Brabham never won a Can-Am race, although his son Jeff has 3.
We've all come to expect racing in local hotbeds like L.A. and Eastern PA, but the sport permeates American life more than you'd expect. Some venues, not Monte Carlo, but certainly surprising. The land of the midnight sun. Mountain ranges hundreds of miles away still dwarf the Rockies. 3-mile-high peaks abound. Fairbanks, Alaska, near the Arctic Circle. Population, just 25,000. A land where one could fly the seaplane to the races, landing at nearby docks. The season shorter up here, Memorial Day to Labor Day, and some weekends, remember, light practically all night. 4 divisions, 6 to 12 cars each. Modest purses, normally $1,000. Wing sprint cars, basic outlaw rules. 3 late model classes, 1 minis completely stocked, includes a Bill Elliott replica. Alaska, the size of 3 Californias, but only 3 racetracks. Needless to say, drives of 500 miles common. Heavy watering usually unnecessary here. Permafrost keeps the soil so moist that gravel is part of the mix, keeping the track together, giving paint jobs maybe a 2-week life. Average crowd, 400, which this time of the year drops off because the hunting and fishing season, which so many people up here depend on economically, gets more serious. Bob, every track has its big winner, perceived by some as hero, others as villain. In this case, it's Dave Dilley. My thanks to him for his help on this story.
And we have 4 live auto racing events here on ESPN beginning tonight, Thursday, with the USAC Midgets at the Indianapolis Speedweek.